Well, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, as you're logging in. Really appreciate you all coming out today. I'm Elliot Levine, Chief Academic Officer here at STS Education. And we're going to be talking today about protecting student data with an endpoint security solution. And got a great guest in store for you today. And hopefully this is going to be information you find useful and something you can take, follow-on action to after this presentation. So as I said, I'm Elliot Levine, Chief Academic Officer, and I've been involved now in education technology for 27 years at this point. Normally I'm joined by my partner in crime, Susan Barnett. She's unfortunately got an internet outage that just happened in the last 15 minutes. So not only will I be helping, moderate our conversation today, I'm going to be doing the polling, and if you do have any questions you would like to ask me or our presenter, just put them in the Q&A box, and I'll be sure to ask them for you. And we're also going to be doing a couple polling questions today to really get a sense of your concerns and knowledge about security and how it could be affecting your school institution. And quick reminder to everyone, if you're, I appreciate you all coming out today to attend today's event, but we're actually hosting several HP Week sessions. And if you attend all three, you will actually be entered into a raffle to win one of two HP AMD laptops. It is the HP EliteBook 745. It has a cool feature in it called SureView. And I'm gonna actually let you in a minute talk about that as to why it's so cool, because I know visual hacking is an issue. So if you are interested, tomorrow's session we'll be talking a little bit about workstations and STEAM education. And on Thursday, we'll be talking about AMD, some of the challenges schools are facing, and what are some of the new products they're going to be coming out with this coming school year. So in the chat window is a link to our events page. Feel free to register for those upcoming events. I think you'll find it pretty darn interesting. So when we talk about education and hacking, we have this mindset for a lot of us that this is just simply students who are oftentimes hacking because they're bored. And the K12 Cyber Incident Map now has logged 1,029 publicly disclosed attacks on K12 schools nationwide just since 2016. And that number has actually nearly doubled just this year alone. So this kind of sets us up for the first question, because we hear a lot in the news lately about these ransomware attacks. And the hackers will come to your school and say, hey, we demand $10,000, $50,000, $100,000, even $200,000. But what nobody's talking about is student data. So here's a little polling question for you. And this one's pretty darn easy, and if you are participating today, please, we do ask that you complete your polling questions in order to receive your gift card. Very simply, how much do you think a single student record is worth on the black market? Give you just another second to do that. Make sure you just take a moment to vote if you want to receive your gift cards. It's a great, simple question. All right, let's take a look and see how you all voted. It's actually quite interesting. The vast majority of you said, 64% in fact said $50 per student. 2 of you said $25, and 2 of you said $250. The correct answer is $250 to $350. And that comes from the U.S. Department of Education. And this was a memorandum issued back last year that on the black market, student records went for between $250 to $350 a piece. And in contrast, oh, and I'm sorry about that, Hina. We'll make sure you can always put your answer in in the chat window going forward if that's a problem. But to give you a context, let's look at 3 recent school districts that have had public disclosures about a hacking incident with ransomware. Fairfax County Public Schools, 187,000 students. I believe they were asking for about $100,000 in ransomware, but when they sell the student data, it's worth $46 million. Clark County in Nevada, and that's Las Vegas schools, by the way, $82.5 million value. Even a small school system like Newhall, they're looking at a value of $1.6 million. So pretty interesting. Now, a lot of your schools have some level of security on your PCs. And I'm just curious here about my next question, which is, regarding printers. And it's what percentage of printers in your schools do you believe have had their default passwords changed? And it's okay, by the way, if you do say, hey, I didn't even know that my printers had default passwords, but they do. 20%, okay, that's a fair number there, appreciate that. All right. So interestingly, only 2 of you indicated that you believe 100% of your printers have changed the default passwords. But the vast number of you do suggest, hey, we have a potential backdoor situation here. And what I'd love to share with you is a little website called Showdown.io. And to show you just how easy it is for a hacker to get into your school system. I can go ahead and look by product on a global map. And I could see here in Marysville, Washington, if I click on it, I can find the exact IP address and the exact name of the device. And in about 3 seconds, I can go online and Google or Bing, depending on your preference of search engine. I can go find the default username and password to get into that device. Showdown.io. Not that I want any of you using it for bad things, but it is an Internet of Things search engine. And this is not the only way that schools have gotten themselves into trouble of late. We even think about what is being printed these days. I personally saw in a college I was teaching at years ago, they printed out a roster of 20,000 students. The staff member printed out this roster. It had social security numbers, date of birth. They got up to go to the restroom. And when they came back, the roster was gone. So now the college had to spend $500,000 on credit monitoring for all of these students. But it has to ask yourself, why, as a matter of policy, didn't the institution put controls in place about what could be printed in the very first place? So security is by no easy feat here, but we've got a real great expert joining us today. And an old colleague of mine, Jürgen Bayer, he is a senior security advisor with HP, really great guy. And Jürgen, I'm gonna stop sharing. I know you have some slides you wanna share. And certainly if anyone has questions, you can put them in the Q&A box. You can put them right on the chat window if need be. So Jürgen, it is all yours, my friend.
Thank you, Elliot. And welcome everyone to this webcast here, and have lunchtime learning session. So I hope you all can see my slides, and
they're perfect.
Yes, thank you, Elliot. And as Elliot already mentioned, I'm a security advisor at HP, work in the product team, product category at HP, and would like to talk about security on Windows devices and what you can expect when you have a HP device in your hands. Doesn't matter if it's a notebook or a desktop. And of course, the The devices Elliot mentioned before, the EliteBook 700 series, are equipped with this very good security features. So you will be surprised how much security our devices come with. And the good piece is it's included in the device, so you don't have to pay any extra cost for this. So let me start and talk about nowadays what do we see at the threat landscape. And I want to introduce you to some malware of the future. And in the future, it's a little bit misleading because this is what we said a few years ago, but the future is now. So this is what we can see and what we can expect when we connect our devices to the internet and see how dangerous malware can become. And here on the slide, I only mentioned two, but these two examples are very interesting because these are UEFI bootkits. So this is malware which goes below the operating system. So this is malware which does not exist in the OS, it exists below the OS. And as you can see here on the slides, it's a lot of good benefits for the attacker to go down this level, because first of all, as we know, we become more and more savvy on tools we install in the operating system. Just don't let the hacker in. But so they have to find better ways to get around this and to stay in the system persistent. And this is one feature these UEFI bootkits provide to them. It's for the hacker, it's persistence, because it is not dependent on the operating system. It sits in firmware, in the firmware level. So every time you would re-image the device, you would not get rid of this attack because it's still there. And as it is in the level below the operating system, all the tools you have, all the nice tools you have installed in the operating system cannot see this attack. So they are not effective in recognizing and giving you some guidance that there's something going wrong and how to mitigate in this case. And of course, as this attack is going on before the operating system is even loaded, the attacker has access to all of the hardware, to the data which is on the system. So that's the ultimate PC control they can have. So think of PC Anywhere, a remote control system, which you like to use, but only in a good way. Here, the attacker is using this kind of mechanism in a bad way. And as it sits in firmware, it's really hard to remove, because the only way you can get rid of it is you might want to refresh the firmware or the BIOS. But this not necessarily helps, because the attackers, they also develop mechanisms to break this firmware update service. So they sit there forever until you replace the system board. So this is something you also have to keep in mind, what's going on in terms of security. And it is clear from a device perspective, we as a vendor for hardware, it's our responsibility to protect our users against these type of attacks and all other attacks. And how can we do this? And for us, it's all about when we look at security, it's about resiliency. To be resilient means it's not only we protect the device. Now we also detect if something is going wrong, and most importantly, we can recover. So this is the best way how to attack these attacks we see in the future, because as it is today, we only know what we know until we see it. And for now, yes, we can be prepared against the attacks of today, but to be prepared for the attacks of tomorrow, we have to build in specific hardware, specific software in our systems, which helps us. And it helps us in a way that we should not look for a specific attack. We should protect specific areas, and no matter what happens, no matter which attack we'll see in the future, you are protected. So this brings me to the point I want to talk about resilient hardware. And when I talk about hardware, it's clear the best level of security I can reach is provide countermeasurements embedded in hardware. So here it's very important to mention the fact that every security you put in software, it can be attacked because it's seen by the attacker. It's running in the operating system, and the attacker find ways around it. So you want to start first with secure hardware. And what do I mean by secure hardware? So when we look at HP devices, commercial HP devices, all these devices carry an endpoint security controller. And this is a piece of hardware which we provide to our systems. And we at HP, we are unique in the industry providing this type of feature. No one else has followed us. And this gives us a unique, let's say, protection in terms of security, because we can protect the level below the operating system, the firmware level, with this endpoint security controller. So this piece of hardware becomes active right after you turn on the device. So it sits at the very beginning of the boot chain. And you remember the first device active controls and can verify and measure what's coming next in the boot chain. And we know we have UEFI firmware code running before the operating system is starting. So 2 million lines of code which can be attacked by an attacker. And as we have seen with load checks and other attacks. So here the endpoint security controller, a fundamental piece of hardware we add to our devices. And you don't have to configure it. It's always there. You cannot switch it off. It's always turned on, and it protects your level below the operating system. And this is part of SureStart. So SureStart is our implementation when it comes to the protection of the firmware level. We are able to self-heal the device. So let's say if we see some malicious code which has been planted into firmware, we can recognize that malicious activity, malicious code, and we can self-heal from this point of view. So SureStart is the way how the system self-heal. So you as a user, you might only see a few messages, but there's no need to provide any technical knowledge or any additional tools. Everything is embedded, everything is built in. And by this way, we have the level below the operating system covered. So this is nothing you have to worry about anymore. So UEFI bootkits or attacks, similar attacks, they're not of an issue on an HP device with SureStart. But protecting the firmware level is not everything. And I want to introduce you to the concept of the layers of protection. So you don't want to rely on one single piece of security. You have to build up security like an ancient castle, like where you have several walls protecting, let's say, the treasure of the castle. And when we look at using an endpoint device. So where does this attacks come from? What are the malicious activity, or what are the dangerous activity a user can perform or can do with a device which can invite, let's say, malware or malicious code? So that's clearly two activities which we see nowadays. It's first, as you receive an email with an attachment which contains malicious code, or um, with mails, spam mails, or other activities, you get motivated to click on a malicious website for any reason. So these are the main two avenues where we can see that malware is entering your device. And as you can see in the numbers here, that there is a potential risk that everyone from us get hit with these type of emails, with this type of attacks. And I personally, when I look in my inbox folder, I get many emails a month which try to incentivize me to click on this malicious link and probably download software or download code which would affect my device. So how can we protect our device from these activities? And imagine you have, let's say, a separate device just for this activities, browsing the internet or opening file or mail attachments. And you would imagine, yes, if I do this on a separate device, separate physical device, my original device with all my data is protected, because the attack would happen on the other device, and the other device is not connected in any way to my device which has all the data on it. So it would be a safe way. And I want to introduce you also to SureClick. Oh, Elliot, is there a question?
Well, I was going to suggest this is probably in education the Achilles heel. I remember there was a study last year that looked across all verticals, and the typical average was, if you sent this out to 100 of your workers, most verticals, 1 to 2% of employees, depending on the vertical, would click on malicious emails in simulations. However, the education vertical got unfortunately the score of an F, because 1 in 20 clicked on it. And there was news just last year, a Mississippi district tested its employees and found that 47% of them clicked on a simulated malicious email. So, with everybody working at home, they forget there is no protection. They are absolutely out there on their own. And unfortunately, in education, we click on a lot of things. Yeah. We can't help ourselves. We see it, we want to click.
Well, there's nothing bad on clicking on things, and you want to explore. And unfortunately, well, these kind of malicious emails, they become very real. So it's not, let's say, in old days, you immediately see that this email is fake because it's the writing is off, it's the English is bad, and so you could spot it immediately that this is not a legitimate email. But nowadays they look really real. So how can we provide we at HP more confidence to use a user when you click on these links, or when you open the attachments, because it looks like, hey, maybe you missed this bill to pay, so hey, this is a reminder, and you open it. So we at HP, we help you in a way that with this kind of activity, we put in a virtual environment, and it's even local on your system. So you work with your system day in, day out, and you open your emails, but everything which comes from the internet, from external, we flag as untrusted. And so if it's untrusted, we will open this, and especially it's on SureClick, it applies to Word documents. We would open this Word document in a virtual environment, and I can tell you, we don't even have to look for a specific attack, because the attack will happen, but it will only happen in this isolated environment, which is totally independent from your working environment. So all your data, all your credentials are safe. The attacker would only affect this virtual environment, this micro VM, and you as a user, you're totally under control. You can see what's going on and you can close it. And if you close the virtual environment, it's just a window, the attack is gone. So it's a very seamless experience, and you're protected. So you don't even know you're protected, and that's the power. You can click on any attachment, and especially on the Word, because this is usually used to spread malicious code to your system and on your system, and you're safe. But there's also, I mentioned before, another way to attack an endpoint. It's you get motivated to click on an external website, a web link, and this external link leads to download software or download code or uses some attacks on your browser session. So we can also protect from them, because we have also a browser, a Chromium-based browser engine, browser running in a virtual environment, which also gives you the confidence that you can click on any web link and nothing can happen to your system. So the power of this protection by isolation is you don't necessarily have to recognize malicious code, because it can run, but it does not affect your system. And
Sure.
I don't know, Elliot, if you have any questions so far. No.
Not at the moment, but I mean, the one thing I did want to share, I mean, and we're only talking about PCs today, but we could also be talking about print, because you could sometimes receive what looks like a harmless invoice, a resume, a work project. You could open it, it could look harmless. You go to print it, and in fact, the malware is embedded in the print stream. So unbeknownst to you, by printing it and sending it to that printer, you've now infected that printer. And I suspect there's a lot of schools and universities that have not really taken efforts to put, and have that same consideration about protecting the PCs and applying it to all of these printers, because they're connected to the internet, they have firmware, they have email addresses, they're connected to your network, their access points with that can get to your student data no different than a PC. But I guess the one that comes to mind for me, a question, when I've talked with school systems, like, well, we update our security every 2 weeks or every month. And the problem is, how quickly now is new malware coming out?
Well, I think it's first, we have to define new malware. So the kind of attacks we see, yes, they're evolving, they're developing, but what attackers usually do, and these hacking groups, they reuse the attacks, they just repackage the attack. So
Sure.
for your endpoint system, it looks like a complete new attack, where the software has to prepare on this new attack. But if we look inside, it's the mechanism, the tools used are the same. But for an endpoint, you look at a completely new attack, and we have thousands of these new attacks created every day. So this is a pretty big challenge on your endpoint, how to secure your device from attacks you have not seen before.
Oh yeah.
And this leads me to the next topic, because on the one side, security by isolation is very effective, because, as I said, we don't necessarily have to recognize the attack. the attack will happen, but it's happening in an isolated environment and does not harm, it's not connected to your work environment. You only see it. So and you are 100% in control. So you close the window and the attack is gone. But let's say there are some cases where you copy software over to your device. Maybe a colleague gives you a USB stick with software, with documents, and this can also be a way to transfer malicious code into your system. And to be honest, SureClick would not help you at this point, because we are not opening an attachment in email, or we are not browsing the internet. So there's another angle we have to look at. So how to protect files which are entering my system. And here we have a second piece of security software embedded in our systems, which is for free on our commercial devices, and it's called SureSense. And with SureSense, we use artificial intelligence to train a brain, and this brain works like a human brain. So it can instinctively recognize malicious code. So if I compare this technology with standard or legacy antivirus technology, or even with artificial machine learning technology, I can see here where the benefit lies. It's when I look at the traditional antivirus software you might have installed in your system, it's good protecting you from known attacks. But as we discussed, Elliot, as we discussed before, there are so many unknown attacks, so many modified, artificial intelligent supported modified attacks, and legacy antivirus would not recognize this attack. They would let it pass through. So you think your system is protected? It's not. And
we got actually another really interesting question here, and I'm not, this might be several different components of the Sure Suite. James asked, he read some technical articles, and hackers were attempting to hijack devices by tapping into like theft detection methods embedded on boards. And specifically, he called out like absolute, CompuTrace. And, is there anything in the HP security portfolio that would really help prevent those sorts of attacks?
Right. Yeah. So it's an excellent question. It goes into the firmware, the UEFI bootkit. So this is what LoadChecks is. It was CompuTrace, a malicious part of the CompuTrace code. And yes, if you do a physical attack to a system, you can go to the SPI, to the flash, and replace modules with malicious modules. And of course, when the system is starting up, it would execute this malicious code. And this is, we call it a firmware, a bootkit attack. And with SureStart, we would protect from them, because we would see, because we know with the endpoint security controller, we do a hash of all the modules in the firmware. So, and we generate, or we do this hashing every time we boot up, even if we, let's say, change the state from sleep to operating mode. And we would recognize that something has changed, and we would replace the malicious part with a legitimate part. And we can do this because we have a secure storage in the endpoint security controller, which carries a good known good firmware pieces. So,
and the key thing is all of that happened before Windows ever even started.
Right. And this happens usually, you see it 2 or 3 reboots. This happens within a minute, and the device is in a secure state again. So this kind of attacks would not affect any HP commercial device.
Right. You would probably see the machine would start up, detect something's wrong, and it might possibly just restart itself, and the problem has gone. So to the end user, that is the experience if somebody were to try to manipulate that sort of breach.
Yeah,
interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Very
So
cool.
yeah, and these new attacks, I mean, they're kind of worrying because our traditional tools we have really running in the operating system, they cannot see them. And what you cannot see, you cannot protect from. Or you cannot protect the device from. So that's a big issue. And so, I mean, security, people became smarter. They try to outrace the attacker, and they're using machine learning technology. So with machine learning, we come a little bit closer to finding, let's say, unknown attacks because we use behavioral methods to recognize or compare the actual behavior with malicious behavior, and would flag it then as malicious code. So there are advantages using machine learning, and we call it the next generation antivirus systems. But they still have a problem because we need someone training these recognition machines, these machine learning based devices and software. And it always depends how intelligent, or it's connected to the intelligence of the trainer, how effective this piece of software is.
I've got
And yeah.
one last question for you. And Joshua wants to know, hey, does this only happen on Windows? What about Chromebooks? And I know the first thing that comes to mind for me, I guess it's twofold. A, now that Chromebooks run Android, there's a whole host of malware out there that can be easily deployed and launched on Chrome. Any extension can be pushed to Chrome, good or bad. But I would have to imagine that the bad guys out there, if they're looking at education as a profit center, and they know that 60% of students are using the Chrome OS, it's only got to be a matter of time before they start building out, if they haven't already, specific ways to attack a Chromebook.
Right, and firmware attacks still can happen on Chromebooks. So even if the attack is not, even let's say Windows-based attacks have to be modified, but firmware-based attacks, they're independent from the operating system running. So these systems are still vulnerable to these kind of attacks.
Great.
Absolutely.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up? Because
yeah.
we're already going great. This is actually a really fun topic. And yeah. I wish we even had time to talk on the print side, but this is just even looking at the PC. There's so much more really that HP is doing around security these days.
Now, I just want to mention to close this the SureSense topic. It's so what SureSense is using is it's deep learning technology. So it's part of artificial intelligence, but deep learning is based on artificial neural networks, which is similar to a human brain. So, and this is why deep learning in terms of malware recognition is so powerful, because we don't need this trainer to tell the system what they should look for. Now the deep learning system trains itself. We just feed malicious code, and we just feed benign code to the system, and the system itself trains according to this. And that's so powerful because the more code I feed in, the more powerful the system gets. And I only can close with this statement that every PC purchase is a security decision, because when you purchase a device, you decide how much security should be embedded in your device, because security is nothing you can add to a device. It has to be built in, and you need a device with which has been designed with security in mind. And we at HP, we do our very best to provide our users this piece of hardware.
And Jürgen, thank you so much for that. It kind of brings us to the last polling question for the day.
Should I stop sharing?
Sure, because I'll share again on this end. And we just have one last question because, you know, one of the great things that we can do here, and we really appreciate that HP offers, is what would you like, you know, we can follow up with you in your school system, your college, and we can bring in experts either from the PC security side, the print security side at HP, to talk more about this, give you some online demos to even show you the capability of tools like SureClick to see for yourself. So please just take a moment to answer that polling question, or if you are interested, just make a note in the chat window. And we're happy to follow up with you right afterwards. But it's, you know, as schools are starting to think about the devices for next year, and I know many of them are still waiting on their devices this year, but all the more reason, you know, the bad guys out there realize, wow, K-12 education, higher education, they're going all virtual. They're working at home now. They're using coffee shops and any Wi-Fi access points. All the, you know, more reason it's going to be easy to hit these, you know, these individual users and find a backdoor into the data trove, as it were. So we'll end the polling there and hold on to that information. And, you know, again, Jürgen, thank you so much for joining us today. And what I'd just like to share for everybody, again, a quick reminder about STS Education. We're really a family focused on technology. We're accounting nerds, we're technical geeks, and education is not just some vertical we support like a lot of companies. All we support is education here at STS. It's in our DNA and it's all we do. And in fact, we're right now HP's fastest growing partner throughout North America, and it's something that we are very proud of. And as I mentioned earlier in this conversation, I'm going to put again in the chat window, if any of you would like to join us, we have 2 more events coming up Wednesday and Thursday, same time, same channel. You can come learn about STEM and Z workstations. We're going to be talking about our new innovation hub. And then on Thursday, we're going to be talking about A&D and education. And you certainly do qualify for your gift cards for each one of the events you attend. And if you come to all 3, you're entered into a raffle to win one of 2 of those EliteBook 745s. And they are very beautiful, very powerful machines. So with that, let me just remind everybody that here at STS, we love being the aspirin to your EdTech headache. And we really thank you for joining us today. And Jürgen, thank you so much for being part of it.
Thank you for having me, and I hope I could enlighten you and rethink security.
Thanks so much, everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon.